This week's Parshat Vayakhel, begins with Moshe telling Bnei Yisrael about the commandment of Shabbat. Then, only 3 psukim later, Moshe tells the people about the Mishkan. However, despite the juxtaposition of Shabbat and the Mishkan, the two ideas are separated in their presentation, and in fact were taught as 2 separate speeches. The Torah specifies that Moshe gathers the people 2 distinct times. In the first case, it says, Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Yisrael, when he gathers them to teach about Shabbat. And the second time it says, Vayomer Moshe al kol adat b'nei Yisrael. However, in both cases, the phrase kol adat b'nei Yisrael is used. What is the significance of the word kol here? According to the Ramban, the word kol is present in order to imply that Moshe was speaking to the entire congregation, both men and women. In fact, the Or HaChaim actually implies that the kol extended so far that even children were present for this speech as well. Why was this so? Because both men and women had volunteered to help with the Mishkan, and therefore they would all have to know about the building of the Mishkan. A little later, in Perek Lamed Hey, Pasuk Chav Bet, when talking about the ornaments given to the Mishkan, the Torah says, Vayavohu ha'anashim al hanashim kol nediv lev heviu chach v'nezem. There are several ways to translate this pasuk. Rashi says the word al, which is normally translated as on, implies that the women were still wearing the jewelry they were bringing. However, the other commentaries interpret this odd phrasing differently. The Ibn Ezra and the Ramban say that this phrase should be interpreted to say that the women were actually the first ones to make their donations to the Mishkan, and the men followed. This is interesting, especially considering the circumstances of the last time women and their jewelry were mentioned in the Torah, which was in regards to the sin of the golden calf, the Chet HaEgel, where, according to the Da'at Tzikanim, Aaron had instructed the men to get jewelry from their lives as a delay tactic. Aaron knew that the women would not give up their jewelry for the purposes of idolatry, and he was right. The men ended up having to take the jewelry from the women without their permission. So that's an interesting contrast to this week's Parsha, where the women jumped to give their jewelry to the Mishkan quickly and willingly. Additionally, the Kli Yakar points out that the Mishkan was an atonement for the Egel HaZahav, which was a sin that the women did not participate in. This means that there was no actual need for the women to contribute at all to the Mishkan, but they did so anyway, and they did it before the men. The women's astute sense of right and wrong, as well as their willingness to do the right thing as soon as possible, are paradigms of the right way to act. This example is also given by one other part of the building of the Mishkan. Perek Lamed Chet, Pasuk Chet, talks about the kior, which was made from copper that came from the women. According to Rashi, the story behind this copper is as follows. Moshe had originally wanted to reject the women's offer of copper, because the copper they were offering came from mirrors, which are objects of vanity. However, Hashem told Moshe to accept the donations, because it had been used to help the women have children in Egypt. How is this possible? In Egypt, when the men worked as slaves, the women would go to them and bring them food. They used the mirror in order to seduce their husbands, in order to continue having children, and therefore continue the growth of Bnei Israel. Therefore, the mirrors had been used in a good and positive way, and were therefore worthy of being used in the Mishkan. Both the women's contributions themselves, jewelry, which they had refused to use in Egel Zahav, and the copper mirrors, which they had used to help Bnei Israel, as well as the nature of the contribution, voluntarily and quickly, teach important lessons. The women were able to take mundane, vain, everyday objects and use them for the greater good. This demonstrates the importance of using every resource to serve Hashem, no matter how unlikely the resource seems. They were also quick to volunteer for something that they did not have to actually do, which shows the Jewish principle of Zrizim Makdimim Lemitzvot on a high level, and shows an enthusiasm for the service of Hashem, as well as the importance of knowing the right time to step in, no matter whether or not there was an actual obligation. Shabbat Shalom.